You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
What is this?
Well, I think Buzz decided that he needed to get a few bites of food before he went off to to his mission. So actually, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the tech or the 3D tech closet, because as you can see there, that's a representation of Buzz Aldrin. Actually, it's Dr. Buzz Aldrin, and I'll give a little bit of background on him. He should gain more respect than being number two. He has a doctorate in astrophysics, if you weren't aware of that, and he had that a long time ago from MIT, so he's a smart boy. And after spending a lot of time researching this Apollo 11 mission that's coming up on 7/20 as the 50th anniversary, I was very impressed with his articulation and descriptions of the moon. And even though, as we know, Neil Armstrong gets a lot of attention, I think he's a cool person too, and also being number one. And again, that'll be the last time I use that reference. It was a team, like we're a team, not a 1 and 2. Okay, with that point, he, I think, had some amazing contributions, and I've kind of slanted more to using it, or my VR experiences, from a team perspective instead of who was first or who was second. All right, but on that note, this is actually a product from a company called Itchy 3D. They make what they call the Avatar SDK that allows you to take a 2D image and convert it into a 3D model. As you can see, I kind of massage a little bit, but it is, I think, a fairly accurate model of the current Buzz Aldrin. As you know, what is he, in his 80s now? And he's one of the few remaining Apollo team members that went to the moon. And clearly he'll be making his rounds on the 50th. So good luck to him. I tried to reach out to him, but obviously they're busy. So I hope he doesn't mind me using his likeness. As you know, we don't profit from our show, nor will we profit from the VR experience that'll be on 7/20. Cool guy, and little shout out to him. But I have something else to show off.
Okay, let's check it out.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's another person that hung out on the moon. And his name is Captain Kopak.
All right, look at this. So you just took my image and it made a 3D, or did you have my 3D
Well,
scan?
remember, yes, I had a 3D model of you, so
right.
Which was done again through the Itsy 3D software, and
I love it.
And turned you into. And now notice, if we look close, I removed the name tag. Did this kind of late last night, but the process is pretty simple. And again, one of the things I'm going to be talking about later on is the ability to take
a 2D.
3D, well, either 2D or 3D models that you made and convert them so that you can use them in ARKit, which is what I'm using now. But actually, it's not ARKit. It is what they call the quick look feature of iOS. So if you bring in a specific type of file format into this thing, you can turn basically any 3D model, and there's some caveats, into these cool realistic models. I mean, I show you basically on our All Things 3D coaster as a little tiny captain, but I could make you full size. Whoa, look at that. Man, I hope he doesn't break my desk. And
it's using the coaster as a registration?
Well, it can actually use any plane. One of the cool things about the current, both ARKit and ARCore, it looks like it froze. There we go. Is that you essentially, it will detect planes, and currently you can both do horizontal and vertical planes. And the cool thing is, in the next version of ARKit, which is ARKit 3 and iOS 13, you'll be able to do occlusion. So one of the things that I was trying to work with Occipital on for this November thing that I did about the Egyptian was actually putting people, like right now you'll see me at the bottom of the screen here with Captain Kopak in the background, but I'm using a green screen to do this feature. So what the new feature in ARKit in iOS 13 will allow me to do is actually to create that green screen by just using depth information. And what makes it even cooler is that I'll be able to put myself either behind you or in front of you, which most green screen is only a 2D plane detection. Now we'll be able to do 3D plane detections, so you can actually have objects in front of you or behind you. And so it's going to be a really cool feature. Now, I've used this myself in our show, but I had to actually create each plane and put me objects before or after me. So it's a little more laborious. In the future, it'll be more automatic. So one of the things I'll be working on for the 720 event is to do a selfie with Buzz around the ladder with the iconic plaque that they both discussed. Actually, I think it was Neil Armstrong who read it out loud. So you'll be doing a selfie, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
so, yeah, I don't know if it'll be one of the first demos, but it'll be.
And what's the
one
app
of them.
that you're in right now?
Well, this again, and I'll jump out
It's
of
like
it.
an ARKit app in iPhone that you can
No,
download on the
it
App
is.
Store?
If you have a 2017 or newer iPad or iPhone, it is called Quick Looks, and essentially you'll find out if you've got the latest iOS 12.
But it's an Apple product?
It's yes.
So it's published
It
by
is.
Apple.
Right, but it's included, and let me get out of all that. If you look on your, what do you want to call it? Your screen.
iOS. Yeah,
your
home screen.
Okay, your home screen. You'll find an icon called Files now,
Yeah.
and that gives you an opportunity to go in and look at certain things like your iCloud Drive. And then from there, if you use this what they call USDZ file format, you'll be able to bring 3D models in, and as I mentioned,
Oh, that's what that file extension was. I saw you emailed
exactly.
me
So
that.
download that, and if you've got a newer iPhone
Okay.
or an iPad, you'll be able to do the same thing I'm doing. So it's a cool little feature that anybody can do, and it's really easy to use. And again, here's my Buzz Aldrin version that I'm downloading now because it was up on the iCloud, and then I can click on it, and then if you can see behind me. Give it a moment. There we go.
In the file viewer lets you view 3D files now.
Exactly.
That's pretty handy, actually.
Yeah, and actually, it's been around for about a year now. But the problem is the USDZ format, like a lot of things from Apple, is proprietary. And actually, I shouldn't say it's proprietary. It actually is based upon the USD format, which is the Pixar. And what makes it unique is that it combines all the textures and mesh into one file. But of course, Apple puts their own spin on it, and sadly, not a lot of products like Blender or free products have export capability. However, I will go through a little bit of how to do that. So if you've got a Mac device, or if you've heard of a product called Vectary, you can make one of these yourself. And so as you can see, it's kind of fun, and it's, as you saw, you got a link so that you could download it and do the same thing. One of the things that they're going to be working on in the future is collaborative capability. So you could do basically 3D markup. And in this future, there will be an Apple AR glass. You both could be wearing it and looking at the same model. So they really are really behind this augmented reality or mixed reality push. Currently, it's on iPhones, but some people think either in the end of 2019, they're going to introduce it, and probably in 2020, but it'll be their AR glasses. And I've heard rumors that they're going to be using like 8K image projection screens. So it'll be kind of like a VR glass, but you'll be able to see the world through it. That is one interpretation. And I have some evidence that they've been working with a Chinese company, but with the atmosphere right now in that area, who knows what's going to happen. But currently you can do this. And the other cool thing is if I press the AR button, there we go.
You can just lay it down on an object or on any planar surface. That's really cool, Mike.
And Buzz is in the room now. And let me get up. Hey there, Buzz.
You can get up close. Yeah, I've seen SolidWorks has their e-drawings viewer on the iPhone, and we were playing around with they have some AR functionality built into the iPhone app and the Droid app, and but you print out a QR code, you lay that on a table, and then you can look at objects that you've designed in SolidWorks, and it will scale them appropriately if that QR code is at 100% scale. And so you can actually see a part, let's say, in the real world, kind of, and be able to like walk around it and kind of see it in real, it's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, as you know, we talked a lot about Magic Leap early on, but I'm not a big fan of them, and I don't like what they're doing now with the company Nreal. They're kind of jumping on the Chinese bandwagon of bashing all Chinese companies, and he's kind of using that to say that this guy ripped off his ideas. But people need to keep in mind his name, I guess, is Abby Ronan, or Ronitz. I can't remember his name, so I apologize. No, Roni Aberitz, there we go. He has sued other people who have left his company. So this is not new for him. And frankly, I think their product, again, it was a developer version, was underwhelming. And Nreal has kind of stole the CES show because they came out with a relatively inexpensive, cool little product that is basically a pair of glasses, and people have been impressed with it. So of course it's going to take away from their market. And I don't think they've been doing very well to begin with, because it's basically a 2,000 plus product. And I think the market they were trying to go for, which is the cool artists, frankly, I don't think the artists have a lot of money. And I don't think Apple understands that either. But at one time they had, being an artist, if that's how you're going to make your living, clearly you don't make a lot of money at it. Or a graphics designer or a video editor. There's not, some people do, but most people don't. And when you have to buy premium products to do that kind of work, it kind of hurts your bottom line. Okay, so enough of that. I think it's time to get into the first item. And let me make sure I can bring it up. Here we go. And if you remember, Chris, we actually covered this together, and we had, I think Vince was his name, who was the project leader for the 3D scanning of this Kickstarter project. Now I have had a couple of emails, and I was hoping that he'd return mine today so that I could identify it, but I'm pretty sure this suit, if you remember, was scanned, and there's a little video you can watch. You can go out to the Kickstarter. I think a lot of this is available even if you didn't sign up for it, but I think both of us did, right?
I'm not sure I backed this, but I know you did.
I did. I think I went in for the $30, so I guess I got a footprint. I wish I would have gone in a little further. No, maybe it was just a $20. I wish I would have gone in so I could get the 3D model of the glove. Which I guess here, $35, you could get the link. But I have heard that once they announce this or make the presentation, which is July 16th at the Smithsonian, and we'll get into a new article here in a second.
It's coming up.
Yep, yep, it sure is. They will have the suit on display, and I have a little article on how they created, what would you call it, the mannequin in order to support the suit, which had its own problems, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be in an environment enclosed glass container. And from all that, really cool on how they've approached this with 3D scanning. I was hoping that he could direct me to a specific article that talked about all of it, but we basically know the tools. They use an RTEC, they use a laser scanner, they did some internal analysis using CT scans. So basically they threw everything at it, and thanks to people who backed it, that obviously helped in moving this forward. But I heard it was fairly expensive, like $2.5 million to actually do this. It may actually be more than that. But I think it was important to preserve, and more importantly, and they've done a good job. We talked about Smithsonian making their 3D models available to download or to view, and they will be doing the same thing, I've been told and read, with this model too. So you'll be able to get a high resolution version of the suit. Until then, I have a cool model, and we'll talk about that more later. All right, so the next article is, as mentioned, how they went about making the display. And as we do, we don't spend a lot of time reading off of it. You can go out and find it yourself. But I think it's pretty cool because, like many things today, they did the CT scan, remember I mentioned that, so they could analyze the space so they could actually create custom supports. And here you see some images of that. And also they printed things in aluminum. And, you know, both of us have worked with some materials. Aluminum is a difficult metal to work with. It has a high temperature. So using aluminum sintering or titanium are both, you know, kind of exotic ways to 3D print, but I think by now they've managed to do this. I mean, if you're willing to spend the money for it.
Yeah, I don't understand why they would go through the trouble of doing a metal. That's
Structural
for the
strength.
internal. Yeah, but for the internal. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the copolymers are strong enough to support human weight, you know, or simulate human weight. I would think that it's printing aluminum is definitely overkill. You'd think. I would think.
Well, I haven't read the article completely. They may have a defense
They probably,
for their
yeah.
reasoning.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
But it's a nice detailed article. I browsed through it. It shows how they went ahead and created the mannequin to custom fit these components and then obviously connect together. The other thing they had to do is actually assemble this thing inside the suit, because they couldn't obviously rip the suit apart. There weren't actually seams. So they literally built this model here that you see and component by component assembled it while it was in the suit.
Wow.
So, and here you see the suit on display. And then they don't show it, but I have seen some images, and you can go out and find them, of what they currently will have on display. And again, that will be 7/16. So if you're at the Smithsonian or want a reason to go there, not only will they have this, but they will have, I don't remember the model number, but one of the, was it the prototype lunar modules, or one that they were going to send out for another test in Earth orbit before going to the moon. They will actually have that on display too. So if you want to see what the lunar module looked like at the time, I think they restored it. There's also another one at the Kennedy Space Center that's been restored. So they put a lot of effort in these locations. But if you're in the Portland area, what's just as good? A VR representation of the lunar module, which is what I've been working on for about 5 months now. And the title is Apollo 11, One Small Step Forward. And I used to say VR experiences, but now that I have a few AR or augmented reality or mixed reality, it's the VAMR experiences. I don't like VAXR for whatever reason. You can use your own imagination. VAMR, which is virtual augmented mixed reality acronym, that's what I have chosen to use. So there will be 4 experiences. 1, you'll be able to walk on the moon in your own virtual suit. Literally your hands and your feet. It's kind of cool to kick rocks with your feet in VR.
Yeah, we did the demo, and it looks like it's coming along.
It's going to be fun. And yeah, we did that last week, and then there'll be one where you can pilot the lunar module. That's not something new. There's another company that's done something like that. But I've taken a little step further. I've created a simple mock-up in actual controls, thanks to my buddy here, Chris, who 3D printed. I don't have them here, but they came out well. I think the joystick's a little big, but maybe it was so that they could grip it with their gloves. I don't know. But
it did seem big when it came through.
Yeah.
It seemed big, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, this is a big joystick." But yeah, it actually, I put it around my hand, and I'm like, "Huh, it actually is kind of ergonomic."
Well, you mean the thruster? Yeah, the thruster I think is the right size, and I scaled both equally, so it wasn't like I scaled the joystick. So I'm thinking with the glove on, you probably need something a little larger,
yeah,
in order to be able to grip it. And they did have gloves on, if I remember correctly. It wasn't the Lunar Excursion glove, but it was still another glove. And if you've ever tried to do anything in gloves, it's not fun, but they practice a lot on that. So I think that may be one of the reasons. So again, these will be custom printed that will match those in the lunar module, thanks to my friend Chris. And they'll be connected and using the VR controllers more as positioning devices to align the VR world with the real world you'll use proprioception, basically put your arms out in the blind, but because we know where our hands are at, even if our eyes are closed, we'll be able to grab those joysticks and push buttons because they will be where we see them in space. Now, at least that's the goal, and I've tested this before with a few other items I've worked on using trackers, and it's pretty effective. So why would I want to do that? Because I want people to feel like they're actually maneuvering it instead of using a joystick or a gamepad. I want them to actually get the feeling that they're standing there and the lunar module surrounds them, at least the interior. So there will be that experience, and then the augmented or mixed reality is a proprietary pair of glasses from Dreamworld. They're going to be making a new version that allows mixed or 6 degrees of freedom, which means you'll be able to move around with them now. They're an alternative to the Magic Leap or the Microsoft headset. And you'll be able to actually look at the spacesuit, kind of like what we did with the phone, but you'll have glass on, so it'll appear like Buzz is in the room with you. And I'll add a little bit of animation. Maybe he'll wave, I don't know. I haven't figured that part out. But he'll do something, and it'll feel like he's there with you. Maybe come out, shake your hand with his glove, I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out, but I'll go with something other than saluting, since we now have the saluting Aldrin. We'll have maybe the waving Aldrin, or maybe the handshaking Aldrin. I don't know. The cool thing is, after rigging and developing this model, I can do whatever I want with him. You know, have him tell you how he took a crap on the moon. I don't know. Okay, let's move on to our next item. Where do we go? Staying with the theme, 3Ding to the moon. You know, we already had talked about this, gosh, what's it been, almost 3 or 4 years ago, about, in one of our seminars, about, what's that guy's name? I don't know,
Elon?
SpaceX. Oh, that guy, yeah. Do you remember? One of the things he bragged about, which is good, I think he was worth boasting, is how he used titanium sintering to create components for his rockets. Now, again, remember, it was components. Now, what this company has done is they're basically developing the entire 3D printed rocket. So, again, I won't spend a lot of time reading it, but you can read the whole story. And it looks at pluses and minuses. Some companies believe this is kind of wasted effort, but essentially they will, here's, I guess, a fuel tank that looks like it was 3D printed, but essentially they're 3D printing all the components because they can custom and test them very quickly. And it talks about the company who's trying to do this. So again,
Yeah,
take
and
your time to go.
if you want a really good explanation,
you know what? I apologize. I was not on my screen, so let me jump back. So for those of you who have entertained yourself with Chris, I apologize.
It's all good.
All right.
I was just going to say, if you want a pretty decent explanation of some different types of rocket engines, and it's kind of builds up to SpaceX's kind of largest rocket engine that they've, you know, the biggest motor ever built. Is the Raptor engine, this latest Raptor engine. If you kind of want to see some of the differences between, you know, oxygen burning, methane burning motors, there's a really good explanation by Everyday Astronaut on YouTube, and he has some really good visuals, and you can kind of see the internals of the rocket engine, how it works. I'll put that into the show notes here.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then, as you know, we copy these show notes directly out to the YouTube once they get pushed up. So.
And I could put it in the chat here too. And you can probably see some really, if you're engineering inclined, you could probably see some really really kind of some interesting
Innovative
ways that you might be able to 3D print you know, this geometry or the geometries for it to make it much more efficient. You know, there's some really complicated routing that's involved for during the burn cycles and stuff. So you can control all of that. And, you know, if you think about it, when you're building layer by layer with sintering and you're building a rocket motor, you can control the interior cavities extremely well. You can make voids. You can make it not only lighter, and you can make heat breaks in certain areas, or you can make cooling chambers in certain areas. But you can control flows because you can control your routing a lot more easily than if you were going to, let's say, try to mill it or whatever, you know, because if you're going to mill it, you got to get a bit wherever there's going to be a void.
Yep.
You don't have to do that. So 3D printing kind of changed the game for motor design, and you can design pretty much anything you want, as long as the powder can be removed afterwards, as long as you can get that, you can blow that powder out. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And I know they've got some really exotic metals that they've invented. SpaceX invented their own alloy that goes into the Raptor, and you can find out more about that on Everyday Astronaut on YouTube. He's got a really good video kind of explaining some different, the progression of rocket engines too, all the way from the V2 all the way up to where we're at now.
Yeah, that's important. And I don't think Wernher von Braun got enough credit. There's a good book. There's a few of them out there, and I don't remember the title right now. It gives a little history about the man. He, as you know, he was part of the Nazi Party, but
I know.
But do you have to read a little bit more of the backstory? That was basically so he could make rockets. He was not a Nazi activist by any means, and he actually, with his team, when the Germans were losing the war, decided, okay, where do you want to go? To the Russians or the Americans? And most of them said the Americans, so they made this huge deal. We've got these box cars already with our V2 parts in that. They're yours, take us. So he was already wheeling dealing at the end of the war. So I'm obviously laughing about that, but he clearly did whatever it took to be advantageous. But you know, the thing that we should not forget is that he did develop a rocket.
And you also shouldn't forget
killed
that he was
a
a Nazi. And him and like 20,000 other people that were brought over to the U.S. during Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in our country.
It's like any technology. Technology not inherently good or bad. It's how you use the technology. Not really a big fan of how he was using the technology. Not really
early
a big
on,
fan of how other people were using technology. But you know, we're here, and you know, you can linger on the past, or we can kind of live in the present.
The point I was going to make is clearly he was more motivated to sending men to the moon. And if it weren't for the fact that he had created the F-1 rocket and the Saturn V, that more than likely would not have happened. And if you follow the Russians during that same time frame, they couldn't actually get to that point of creating that booster.
But the Russians, and so that's another part of it, right? Is these rocket engines. If you go back and you look at some of the stuff the Russians were working on, we've actually now gone back to what the Russians were doing, and we're copying what they were doing back then, and you know, basically the 50s. And I mean, we're there now. We're going backwards to kind of revisit a lot of this technology because they had some pretty advanced breakthroughs that they were working on.
Well, the thing is, you have to look at approaches because we have lower budgets, we have to use ingenuity. And I think, in my experience in working with some Russian engineers, you think differently. And now we're seeing those processes on how they can apply to more modern technology. So as we both, I think, believe we should have a more open world as far as information and so forth, and I think this planet would benefit from it. But that's my strong opinion. I can't speak for you, Chris, but
yeah, for sure.
And so it's nice to see that we do have at least some collaboration amongst different countries. And I'm a little saddened that we took the approach we did with the Chinese, with not inviting them to the ISS. I think they could have contributed immensely to it, and maybe things could have been a little different. But you know, sometimes the politics in this country can be a little bit questionable. But getting out of there, as you can see, 3D fabrication, 3D scanning, and design tools have really changed the way. And if it weren't for these tools, I don't think we would have a SpaceX. And as you know, there was just the launch of, you can help me out here, of their
the Falcon Heavy.
Falcon Heavy that has pretty much accomplished everything that it needed to do.
And it landed the two side
Two.
boosters on the launch pad.
2 or 3, yes.
That's pretty cool, though.
No, it is. It's very cool. And, a lot of people, well, I mean,
I went to go watch a launch at Vandenberg a couple weeks ago.
Oh, that's cool.
But it was pretty fogged over. You could feel it. I go to watch them every now and then because it's only about an hour away from where I am.
From you, yes.
Yeah, so it's pretty
it's
cool.
a little bit further. You're in Paso Robles.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and a
cool
half
to be able to go and watch them. But it was fogged over, but you could feel and hear it coming down, which that's pretty cool when it was coming back, because this one was landing back at the launch pad and it landed, but we couldn't see it. So
no, but that is very cool. And if you followed, regardless what country, sad that the Israels weren't able to land their little lunar module, but or lunar robotic device, but we've had others, and again, I don't have a problem. The Chinese were able to do it on the far side of the moon, and which I think is an accomplishment, and all of the efforts we've done on other things. Don't forget the Japanese landing crafts on asteroids, which are even little tiny things. So the fact is that we not only have the math pretty much ironed out on all this, but we clearly have the computer capability to, I would say, as we're finding out, land something on a pin of a head. So I think that's really cool. And having followed this for decades, it's sad that we don't have the initiative we once had, but obviously we have a lot of other things that are of concern that require lots of money. But I think what we've done so far with a lot of private enterprise it's been cool. Okay, so let's move on to the next item.
Oh yeah, this I just wanted to touch on briefly because I saw it this morning. It's pretty cool. This is a guy in the university.
Hang on. Are we on the same thing? Or you got something that you want to bring up?
Are we down? Are we down on the vacuum cleaner?
No, actually, okay. So we're still on you. So let me bring that up for you. Okay, here we go. We're switching, and then we'll play this little 11-second video. All right, are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready. It's a guy that runs a 3D print lab at a university. I can't remember which one. I'll have to look it up. He hasn't posted the model files yet, but this is basically like a Dyson equivalent or a vacuum design, but it uses a brushless motor from like a quadcopter or a RC, and he's got the ESC here hanging off the side, you can see. But it's like a high-powered vacuum cleaner. He's just has a function generator. That's why he's using this oscilloscope in the background as a function generator that's driving the ESC and just turning the motor on. And then he has this high-power vacuum that he created out of 3D printed parts. The only part that's not printed is the motor, the bolts, and then this clear piece of pipe, essentially, that's like so you can see what's going on inside. Mm-hmm. But all the little internal parts and the little turbine and everything for the vacuum are 3D printed. So I can't wait to see when he posts this up to Thingiverse. His users up, and he said he's going to post it at some point this week. So I think it's a pretty interesting little design.
No, it is, and actually, the actual fabrication stays within the limits of standard FDM. So it may not look as aesthetically pleasing as what's the name of the vacuum cleaner that you just
mentioned?
A Dyson.
Yeah, but it's you don't need to spend $500. You can spend
or more.
Yeah, or more on
some
of
and
these
I can't
vacuums.
think. There's a model that my wife actually found, and we love. It has a lot of the traits of
similar features.
Of the Dyson.
Oh yeah,
but it's like far less. You can buy one at Costco, and I can't think of the name now. But so yeah, Dyson's a little overpriced for me. So this is cool.
Yeah, pretty fun. Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on that just because I thought it was kind of a cool design.
It is. All right, let's jump into 3D in medicine, and which was what I was on, but I was still on your head, so we'll go ahead and go back to it. I've never heard of antmini.com, but I thought this was a cool little article. Why? Because, I have a little history of 3D printing people's medical imaging files. And Chris, you have some experience
Oh, these
putting them on
are
a
AMA
little dog.
codes.
These are what they're called CBT codes, but yeah, AMA, or CPT codes, and what they allow now, and I read later on, is that, and it appears that they'll be implemented by Medicare and Medicaid, you can actually get reimbursed.
So we can
For,
succubus off the government and print stuff?
yeah. What was the word you used, Jack?
Succubus? We can just print stuff and then issue these codes and get reimbursed for whatever we want?
No, clearly.
No, okay, it doesn't work that way. Oh,
well, a little bit, but yeah, I mean, obviously, if
a
you're
little
willing.
bit, or it's either yes or no.
Well, a lot of reasons most people don't work with Medicare is because, one, they have some stringent requirements, even though some people still rip them off, but they are trying, and they don't pay as much as private in some cases. I think that's all changing. So yeah, you could probably do this, but you probably have to jump through some hoops.
Oh yeah, you got to be like a HIPAA registered entity, probably.
So I don't know all the nuances of that, but from what I understood on that is not that Medicare and Medicaid plans to reimburse based on what were the codes, 0559T and 0561T, but the fact is that you can now place these codes in your standard accounting and keep track of the financial component of modeling patient information. So even if you're not getting reimbursed, you can at least financially keep track of it. So you can determine your ROI without having to put a lot of other effort into it. So I think that's a really cool factor. And here we show a couple of models, but we've been doing this for several years. I thought it's really cool that we're finally embracing that in the United States. We've both talked about how we feel the United States has lagged a little bit in getting medical things done, but then I've heard other things and seen other things in some documentaries that I think we may have to, in some cases, temper what gets pushed out there. So some areas we can excel in, some areas we need to have the restraints. It's not a perfect system, but we're good that people are seeing the potential, and having these codes now, I think, is a significant advance, and we'll see where it goes from there. It'll be interesting if the insurance companies, the private insurance companies, embrace this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So my next item, I wanted to talk a little bit about Thingiverse. I don't know if you've been on Thingiverse lately, but it is definitely been slowing down. Thingiverse.
Well, I'm going to bring it up right now as we speak.
Yeah, let's see. Thingiverse. Okay. And it looks like it's working all right now. But I've definitely noticed a lot of downtime lately. So Thingiverse and GrabCAD both. So Thingiverse owned by MakerBot, right? Started by the people at MakerBot. MakerBot owned by owned by Stratasys. Stratasys also bought GrabCAD. So two of the biggest 3D model repositories on the internet are owned by Stratasys.
Okay, so why don't you give us a little bit more definition of what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so Thingiverse has STL surface models mostly. You can find some of the original CAD or links to CAD, but it's mostly just 3D printable models. So its focus is like models that are ready to go. You can just throw them into your slicer and print them. GrabCAD is focused around engineers and designers, and they put up the actual native CAD files, step files, IGES files, SolidWorks files, etc. And so it's a big repository for actual editable solid CAD models.
Yeah, so if you're into design and you want to save some time, or you want to basically see how somebody else created a component, GrabCAD is an excellent tool.
Yeah, and they've been gold standards for a long time. Thingiverse has been kind of the go-to STL repository.
Well, in this country. And,
I think it's still the biggest worldwide. I mean, as far as user base and
let me see if I can remember, because you also own an Ultimaker.
Yeah, so Umagine is Ultimate. Yeah, Umagine is Ultimakers. But if you go on Umagine, there hasn't been a new upload to Umagine. Go to their go to these recent files, or even they're featured. So like they're really, it looks like there's been some stuff added in the last few days, but it's very light compared to what Thingiverse used to be, especially. There's just a lot more content on Thingiverse. So I wanted to give some alternatives because Thingiverse has been having some issues, and everybody's kind of noticed it on the internet. People that are in the forums can kind of attest to. There's been a lot of downtime, a lot of lag. The search feature now is broken. I don't know why. If you type in Titan in the search, if you wanted to find a Titan extruder,
you want me to put in
stuff
Titan
comes
extruder?
Up. Yes, it looks like they might have fixed this problem. They might have gotten wind of it. Oh yeah, so it's coming up now. Cool. So, but earlier today, none of that stuff was coming up. So a lot of people are using Google to actually search the site, which works because Google's indexing it. So who knows? But I wanted to bring up one of my favorite new repositories, which is prusaprinters.org. Go to prusaprinters.org. You can not only find printers around you that have the Prusa printer, which a little concerning privacy-wise, they list even people that didn't opt in on their map, which I don't know if they've changed that. They might have taken that down because they got some kind of people were lashing back. If you scroll down here, though, I mean, there's some amazing models, and they're trying to implement.
Well, let's look at this one here because we are kind of moon themed.
So here, this goes right with it, right? So, and what's cool is if you own a Prusa printer, you can actually download G code that's printable. So they check the G code
specifically for Prusa.
For Prusas, and they're going to try to expand to other printers using their. Because if you haven't downloaded their latest slicer, Prusa Slicer, the new version 2.0 is unbelievable. The quality of prints coming out of the slicer are some of the best quality prints using generic PLA, and some of the generic materials, and even the Prusa materials are some of the best print profiles I've yet seen for support removal. And I mean, granted, the Prusa 3S is a phenomenal printer, but the profiles make it even more of an amazing printer. So really, really love it. And this site is great. If you want to find some parts for your Prusa printer, this is a great place to dig. But yeah, cool. Umagine is another good one. And then if you want to buy models, I know one of my favorite places is CG Trader.
So I love it.
Yeah, CG Trader is a good place to go.
I'm going to give a shout out right now while I'm here.
And you should sell on here, Mike. I don't know if you already do or not.
No, actually, I think I have one model, but I don't.
But CG Trader has some phenomenal models on there, and there's some really good models that you can buy or free. They have free models as well. But if you're looking for like really highly detailed surface models,
well, I want to bring this one up because
architectural models, game assets, that kind of stuff, CG Trader's great.
I want to give this guy a shout out because this is the model that I found. His name's Aldrin.
For $28.
Well, and actually it's on sale, but he worked with me. And I did pay him a little bit of money, but I've also been very clear that this is what I based my model on. Now, if you notice, though, it is just the suit. It's not the Lunar excursion suit. So I had to make some modifications, add the radio pack on the back, but it was a good starter model.
Yeah, for $28, and it's fully, that one can be posed probably even, right?
No, it cannot.
Oh, it's not
so
rigged.
That's the problem, but it's extremely rare. Plus, I also had to decimate it and create a simple model to be used in VR.
Got it.
So I had to put a lot of work in it, but it's a good starting point. And if you've ever had to model from scratch, which I have, it saved me a lot of time. And Alvin, it was great in working with me on it. So I want to give him a shout out that if you need a great model and can't wait to the Smithsonian, pay this guy. He does excellent. Let's go back and look at some of his other work.
The They have a pre-vacation 3D model sale going on right now. Yeah, and a lot of these models, maybe not his models, but they are riggable, and or you can rig them. And for people that aren't aware of what rigging is so rigging software is, there's a lot of 3D software out there where you can take these models and they have like a point on the elbow, the shoulder, the neck, you know, in all the different joints of the body, and you can put it into software that will make it so that it performs like a human. You can tell it to walk. There's some automated software now where you can tell it to run, and it'll actually make a rigged model perform just like a real human.
No, actually, that's a good point, and I have.
So it makes content creation really fast.
Well, sort of.
A lot faster than having to do it all
in the old days.
from scratch.
So I've actually done a couple of tutorials in your absence on that particular subject, in particular using models that aren't rigged. And there are a couple of tools out there that can automate the process, but you have to be very careful because they use generic form. But if you want to get into that, I highly recommend, if you don't want to spend money on Maya, which is the go-to product, but it's also very expensive, Blender's 2.8 it's just wow. And we're going to be talking a little bit later about that. But I use that in combined with, what was the product? Mixamo, which sadly was bought by Adobe, and they have not done anything further with it. So if you've got an Adobe license for all of their products, Mixamo is part of that, and you can bring up a model. The problem with this model here, it's not in a T pose, and it's not really even in an A pose. So I've had to work with it. And I did get it to work with Mixamo, which is a good starting point because that's kind of a generic skeleton that I've been able to work with in Unreal. And the goal was to make this Unreal compatible. And but I had to go back, and they're called blend weights. But you have to make sure that each of these, what do you want to call it, joints on the skeleton distribute through blending each joint on what actually gets to move with it. And so there's some techniques to do that. And I have spent hours massaging this. I still have some problems. If you notice in this particular model here, he has flaps on his arms, which are like pieces of mesh that make it much more difficult in order to do that. You want kind of a self-contained model. And plus, if you want to 3D print anything like this, there's a lot of work that has to go in to do that. And we'll talk a little bit about the things that Chris helped me 3D print, but it's a good starting point. So if you're not really artistic, or if you want to save some time, there are a lot of people, and again, shout out to Aldrin, but Chris is right. CG Trader has great prices, and as he said, pre-vacation, 50% off a ton of models, and also you get points for buying that you can then use for other models. So they really have, I think, a winning approach. The other one that you didn't mention, and I'll just mention it because they've been around a while, is Turbo Squid, but a lot of their models are extremely expensive. The other thing I found, because I've done a lot of searching on a ton of sites, is that the same author will put their model in multiple places, and sometimes their pricing doesn't always, or it depends, like, oh, the premium site gets a better price. Another place that you may not be familiar with that it's made specifically for gaming is Unity, which is a gaming engine. They have a huge repository of models that, and a lot of them rigged, and they're low cost. So there's a lot of places to start with. And so you're right. And the other cool thing is, as you see, this model is extremely detailed, which gave me a great starting point to flesh it out even further. And they have a ton of models that are textured, high detailed mesh that makes a good starting point if you've got the skills to convert it to VR or AR to work with and save yourself a ton of time. And so on that note, great find, Chris, and I appreciate having to be able to give a
and it's also a great place to sell your own models. Like, so if you're a modeler, it's a tremendous opportunity for people that model. Like, maybe you've already done a lot of models in the past, you already have a bunch of models, just throw them on there. And I
Yeah,
mean, might as well
and
make a
that,
couple bucks. I mean, it's a couple bucks here and there, and it's just it's not a lot of money. Some of these, and one thing I really like about CG Trader is their licensing is very, very kind of broad. So they have
yes,
like this royalty free. You can use it for commercial. You can use it for whatever your project is. Most of the models, that's why they're under the price. It'll explain a license, what it's good for, what you can do with the model. Make sure to read that. But it's you know, when you're paying for a model on there, you can, and it says royalty free. That means you don't have to pay per use. I
yep,
mean, obviously you can't go and resell it, but you can resell it in a game, you
yep,
know,
yeah, you
as an
can,
asset
yeah,
in a game or whatever.
exactly. Or you can use it in an
Experience.
image.
Yeah.
And depending on the other cool thing is they associate the author with it. So you can contact the author. In some cases, like mine, I say I'm doing this nonprofit for free. They'll give me a better price. So you have communications. If you want a modification, they are willing. You know, you have some dialogue. So it's not just one model. You can just go with that. You can actually talk with the people. There's something else too. There are plenty of sites that you can, if you want to get something custom created, clearly you could go to these CG Trader and talk to them. But there are a couple of sites I've gone to where I've had, what do you want to call it, consultants, independent designers that I have tasked to do things for a reasonable price. Sometimes you get what you pay for. But if you need independent 3D artist or so forth to design something for you. There are some places, I can't think of it right now. Maybe next month, or I'll put a note in here where you can go and basically identify what you want, and people will provide you bids. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. Very cool. Thank you for bringing that up. It's, you know, both of us probably just unconsciously go out there trying to figure out where to find things, and I think because we have a venue people sometimes watch, we should bring it up. Okay, so finally, let's see, let's just jump back. I've got two videos, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but what did the Smithsonian do with all these 3D scans? Well, as mentioned earlier, they're going to be, here, I'm going to go ahead and turn these down really low so we can talk over them. Okay, so I'll make sure I've got the right one. All right, here we go. So Adam Savage of, I guess it's Adam Savage Tested. So I'm wondering if he broke out from the tested group. They seem to be kind of independent, but this is a great video that they did, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, or I'll just pause it now. But Adam Savage did a great job interviewing the people that created these large 3D fabricated, basically life-size models of that spacesuit that was scanned by the Smithsonian to put it in certain, I guess, high volume ballparks right outside of it. So they go through and talked about basically how they detailed, painted these, the whole process. And in fact, I'll just jump through it. The type of printers used. I actually saw that at CES. That was kind of cool. The scanning process, the actual model, as you can see there, and then how they took that 3D model in order to create a mold for it, as you can see here, and then the painting process, and then the detailing process, and even down to the little stitches. I don't know if you saw that there. And then the writing, these are like decals. Actually, I think they may even be, I don't know how they did that. They kind of plasticized cloth in order to keep it looking like, you know, same thing with those logos and so forth. Really cool process. So if you want to see craftsmen at work using 21st technology, great video by Adam. The other thing that I'll show really quickly is that the
thing I love about those guys is they're really practical. So they, a lot of times, you know, it's like anything in Hollywood, you fake it till you make it, you know, you kind of just fake it as good as you can, and you keep going through the iterative process, making it, refining it, getting it even closer and closer and closer. And, you know, they're not going for an exact replica, obviously, because like you were saying, if you go for an exact replica, you're looking at millions of dollars. But with the materials you've got in your shop or down the street or that you can order online, you can get
Or-
pretty dang close approximation to, you know, making it look realistic, you know.
Well, and as we know from our own experience with 3D fabrication and scanning, you can create custom components based upon the original blueprints or designs, which appears Adam Savage has embraced, because he talks a lot about it. But here's his own suit that he created. How neat is that? This is called the A7L suit, and I didn't watch it completely. It's funny, you see the watch there? Expensive watch, but if you look at some of the Aldrin, I didn't add it to mine because I didn't want to copy it completely. In fact, I wanted to be kind of like a trivia thing. Did you like, where's Waldo? Where's the watch? But I didn't add it to mine, but he did to his, or actually he may have actually bought it. That's an expensive watch, by the way. And yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. All the little components here that he added to the suit. And he talks about what he did in order to do that. So it's very cool. And oh, look, he gave himself a little, what do you want to call it, label there. So, as we know, there are tons of creative experts in design, manufacturing, processing, and creative uses of the stuff like Adam Savage here. And I'm glad that not only does he demonstrate the stuff that he's capable of doing over his decades of working in special effects and then his other show, also the fact is he goes out and interviews other creative and industrial groups. So hats off to Adam, and hopefully they don't tag me as using their material. I tried to limit it, Adam, and let's see, I think that's kind of about it, huh? I think I guess one other item, and I'm not going to say you can download it. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, where is it? There we go. If you want to try something cool, they've kind of timed it so you don't get all the experience at once. In fact, if you download this, it's available on iOS or your Android device. You can download it and it'll use either ARKit, which is for iOS, or ARCore, which is used for Google devices or Android devices. You can start out with having the full launch assembly of the Saturn V. And I didn't put it on my iOS device, but I'll let you be surprised by it. It's fairly bulky. I don't remember the size, but it's a large file. So make sure you've got the storage for it. So they start out with the Saturn V, and then they allow you to test the boosters, so you get smoke and a little bit of flame, but it doesn't launch yet. You have to wait till the actual launch date, which is kind of cool. So you have to follow this in real time. And then it'll show its tracking in augmented reality. And then I guess there's also a lunar module component. So when it actually lands, you can have a little version of the lunar module and the astronauts kind of running around on the moon. So it's kind of fun from what I've seen. It's free, and obviously it's promoting the JFK Center. So, you know, it's free. What else can I say? And I guess here's the company that backed it. Now, I want to make sure, I'm not going to make sure, but I'm pretty sure there's a reason Raytheon is in here. I'm pretty sure Raytheon is who actually designed the lunar module. And every commander who flew one said that it was the perfect space flying machine. They said it would turn on a dime. I don't know if that was the case, but many of them said exemplary, I can't even say the word, commended its maneuverability. Some fun facts about the lunar module. This thing cannot support itself on the Earth. So it was made specifically to be used in space and on the moon in 1/6 gravity and 0 gravity. It essentially is like an inflated balloon. It has a aluminum, I think it's aluminum skeleton, but all the panels on that are as thin as tin or aluminum foil. And it was literally the air pressure that kept it in the shape that you see there. So imagine that's how you survived. Essentially something that could be probably punctured with a pin. So when they were putting on their suits, they were super careful. Another fun fact, Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin, in putting on his, broke off one of the circuit breakers. And they almost weren't able to get off the moon, just FYI. So they figured it out and was able to actually, I think, use something to pull it back in or push it back in. I think it was his ballpoint pen he used to push it back in. Wouldn't that suck? It's like, oh, beep, I broke off the circuit breaker that's going to save our lives. Oh, we're dead. But
Oh
that's
my.
the cool thing. If you listen, this is why humans are important, especially those who are smart, creative, that are capable of working under duress and coming up with solutions. You know, Apollo 13 was a good example. Great movie. Also, the story is really good. Without these minds from Capcom, as well as those in there, many of these people probably would have perished. So, hats off, at least from my perspective. Okay, so you've got a cool thing for us today. So I will
Yeah,
push to
sure.
your camera.
Okay. Well, yeah, today I wanted to talk about heat inserts because they're an awesome way. I don't think I've ever touched on heat inserts before, and I've been using
Yeah,
more.
you did mention it last week, and I said, oh, I want to know more about that. Now, let me make sure it's the same thing. So essentially, you can, by heating an insert, you can allow the material, the plastic material, to kind of melt, to insert it, and then it has a secure bind because of that process. Is that?
Yeah. So a heat press insert is basically a knurled brass, little piece of brass, and maybe you can pull up one of these links and we can show it
Okay.
on
Do
the
you?
main window. Yeah, they're in the show notes over there. The first link, if you want to
Okay.
pull one up. So they're just a really
Okay.
good way to add heat insert, add strong threads to your 3D prints, and they're really easy. You just need a soldering iron, and they are a lot more. They're just a lot better than having normally you either use plastic screws, which you'll see a lot, and plastic screws are great
Or nylon screws.
or nylon screws, whichever.
Mhm.
But once you run those in and out a few times, then it'll start to strip out, and they're just not very strong. Whereas these knurled heat set inserts are just they're good for if you're going to use that thread over and over. Maybe you have an enclosure that you need to open and close. You've seen these brass inserts probably in a lot of enclosures. If you've done any electronics work. And those are usually put in at the factory, but you can buy them yourself. AliExpress is where I normally go. They're really cheap. You can buy an assortment. They're good. If I don't know if you've seen on like a tap handle, like the tap handle, the bottom of those tap handles you'll see is a little 1/4 inch brass heat set insert. And so what you do is you put these on with your soldering iron. You just basically, I use the outer dimension before the knurl. So there's usually like a little blank strip. You can put your calipers on that, and that would be your your actual hole diameter that you're going to put in your model. And then you can use your soldering iron to just I take a 30-watt soldering iron, usually on most copolymers, gets it hot enough, and you'll just see it kind of slide in. Yeah, and then the next one is these thumb screws. So these knurled thumb screws come in really handy too. So I have this like mobility design that I've been working with.
Let me jump back to.
Yeah, and you can see this.
So I'm assuming, did you 3D print the hole that that goes into?
Yeah, so you 3D print the hole, and then you drop that heat press insert in there, and then I can use one of these knurled nuts, and so you can make toolless designs, because a lot of times you have a design and you don't want to have a tool. So like this is a mobility device. You don't want the therapist to have a screwdriver to crank in a pin. This was designed for people that are maybe suffer from some paralysis and they're trying to figure out how to write again. So you can pop up my own little design, and you can screw down this pen, and then this pen can just sit on the table and whoever can write.
Oh, that's very neat.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, I'm assuming that when you create the through hole for that, you probably want to make it the diameter a little smaller, so that yeah, I mean, you don't want to make it the equal size, or do you?
So if you jump back to that knurled the heat set insert Yeah, go to this box. So you'll see the knurled part, and then you'll see that shiny part that's in between. Yeah, exactly. So you see how there's the knurled part on the outside, and then inside there's like that little shiny. It's like, where there's no knurl.
Right.
I make my hole, the diameter, I put my calipers on that shiny part.
Okay. So the interior is what you want to design for.
The knurl, yeah, and you can even undersize a little bit if you want. You can play around with it. I've just found that when you're setting those heat press inserts, that sometimes you can get, depending on the size or the depth of the hole, that it might gum up your threads with hot plastic that's, if the hole is too small, it'll gum up your threads. So you want to make it the right size, and you'll have to kind of play around with that. You might read up online. I might try to find an article to, because I couldn't really find a lot. There's a few great videos online. Adafruit has some great videos about, they've been making their own heat press insert kind of like bench press thing.
Yeah, I
made
know
out of 3D printable parts. They
Yep.
sell some brass nozzles now that are like specialty tips for their soldering irons. But you can use just a regular soldering iron. You just put it on 30 watt and you can sink it right in. So it works pretty well.
Cool. What's funny is that I have had to use that. I create a lot of things that require 1/4 inch thread because a lot of things I make are camera based. So I have put a little more effort into getting something more than just like a nut or something that I make the hole for in the 3D model. I have started to do what you're doing, but I haven't gone specifically to that route yet. So that seems like a cool.
Yeah, and you'll notice like so in Onshape, some of the solid CAD obviously already has a hole library built in, so you can size a hole for, let's say, a 3mm if you're going to tap it, or just a 3mm clearance hole. You can tell it that you want a close fit if you want the threads to actually engage, or if you want a loose fit if you don't want them to engage at all, or a normal fit, they'll engage just slightly. In this case, you actually call out your own because it's going to be an odd size normally for the heat set insert. But yeah, the hole wizard is a tremendous tool in CAD, and it can really help you on this. So I just put in, like I said, that shiny number wherever the shiny is. I just put my caliper. It seems to have been working really well, and it makes a really strong. And you can use that thread over and over and over, unlike plastic threads. Because a lot of times you'll even try, like I actually have printed threads. So you'll do a helix pattern, and you'll bring in and you'll actually print the threads. But those will start to wear as well. So this is just kind of a better, more permanent way for things that are going to go in and out.
That's actually very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, I missed you, buddy.
Yeah.
We missed you. The print.
Oh yeah, I missed you guys too, or I missed you too, Mike. Yeah. I'm glad to be back sharing these little tips that I've been learning along the way. And like I said, credit to Adafruit and some others out there, because this is not. I mean, I didn't create this, but I just like to share these little tidbits that I'm learning along the way.
Yeah, frankly, we don't. Everything we do is not really done in a vacuum most of the time. We build upon other people's stuff. So, okay. So on that note, I think we're going to head into the tech car, the 3D tech closet. And let me see, we'll bring up which camera. I think we'll start with my main camera, and then we'll drop to my object camera. So before I get started, I'm going to, because Chris might bow out on us, and if he does, I want to make sure we give him credit where it's due. So one of the things that I've been working on for this extravaganza event now sadly, Chris, and hopefully I don't disappoint you, I have had a fallout with OMSI. As you know, I've been working on this for about 5 months, and I have been promoting it and branding it, and they finally, 4 months after the fact, said, we want to take care of all that, hand us all over your materials. And I said, I don't want to do that, and I'll bow out of your Lunar Day, but continue to do your After Dark. Well, they dropped me out of that too, so I no longer have an association with them. But they weren't providing any money to me, just a location, nor any support from what do you want to call it, volunteer perspective. I was providing all that, and thankfully I've been working with a location called the VR Cafe, which is really cool because if you don't own one, and like you said, you gave yours up, but if you want to take your cousins or your nieces or nephews to a place that's cool, reminiscent of the old video arcade, VR Cafe is what do you want to call it, family friendly, large spacious area. I've done an interview with them. You can go find it on YouTube. They're a great little group. They're based in the Washington Square Mall. I know that's probably something you don't remember, Chris, because they tore down the one in San Luis Obispo. But they still have malls here in Portland. And with the hot weather that we now are getting, it's a great place to cool off. But on the 20th of July, I have moved the whole thing to them. And they're already set up to do VR to begin with. So we're going to be setting up free experiences where you'll be able to walk on the moon, or fly the lunar interior, or get 3D scanned to become your own Captain Kopek. But the last thing is you'll be able to create a custom model. So once we scan your face, not only will you get a little model you can view on your phone for free, but through, I'm hoping, Chris Kopek services, if you want a single color version. We still haven't figured out pricing, but I'm assuming it'll be a great price. And you'll get a custom version with your face in it. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump to my screen. And this is something that Chris has already printed. This is the 6-inch version, basically in one color. Now, if you know, it's a little glossy. Do you remember that material? This material?
Yeah.
So
3D coat.
Yep, I still use this, and it is like an epoxy shellac. It's a 2-part epoxy, but it's above a, what do you want to call it, a lower viscosity or higher, which I can't remember now. So it brushes on, and so I did that because it basically helps reinforce parts and protects the finish. And then I didn't, normally what I do is go back and take a fine sandpaper or an emery cloth and then make it more of a matte, and it also basically prepares it for painting. So this is an unfinished version, so you get a 6-inch version and do your own painting if you want. Obviously, with most of it being white, the painting process won't be that difficult. And this one the model was created with the visor on, but I have a version where the visor is not on, and it has a small peg in it that you can put a 3D model of yourself after you subtract it out of this area, which I would do. And then you basically insert your face into it, and you have a custom version of yourself that would look kind of like the model. In fact, let's see if I think I can bring up an image, which I'll do in a second. So yeah, here's the 6-inch version. We haven't figured out what Chris will charge for this, but I have worked with Chris in the past, and he will be the provider of this. Here is a lower cost version that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we should be able to make these for about $5 or $6. And they're like a keychain fob. And I, again, put a little bit of material on it. And there's a newer model that's easier to print too, Chris, which I think you have, but this was an earlier model. But yeah, you just little keychain fob. And then I'm sure that I'm not sure, but I'm assuming Chris can't print in metal yet. So I'm also working with Shapeways if you want a more esoteric material. But
Wow.
keep in mind, this costs $40, and this is steel, and it's heavy.
Wow.
It's really heavy, but if you wanted a durable version of it, there's that. And my wife says, I want that one because I need something so I know where my keys are at. I think it's a little heavy, and I have a lot of things. I have, like, what do you want to call it, a tool and a flash drive.
Sure.
My keys are my little tech office on the go. So this is a little bit more. So the plastic or nylon, or what did you print this out of? Is this ABS?
No, that's PLA.
Okay. So if you want PLA, which is a little bit better for the environment, and you can eat it if you wanted to, I wouldn't suggest it. So it's lightweight, and it should be fairly durable. And again, the newer model has the what do you want to call it? The tubing and so forth that goes to the life support are a little bit, what do you want to call it, bounded to the model a little bit better. So you can still see them, but they're not as loose as this. So they should be a little easier to 3D print. In fact, this is an example. If you notice off to the side here, they're closer and a little thicker.
Yeah.
The cool thing, and this is what I was talking about, even if you go with a commercial printing company, you still have to ensure your models meet their specifications. And metals is a 2 mm wall thickness. So this was originally designed to be around 1 mm. So I had to go back and really push the design. And my go-to tool over the years has been NetFab. And so I go back between Blender and NetFab to get this to a level where it would print in metal. Now, luckily, steel is the worst case, 2 mm. Some of your finer metals like gold. But you know how much this would cost in gold on Shapeways? $4,000. Yeah, it's expensive. And then I think
print
platinum,
that in gold.
they could, if you want to spend that kind of money.
Jeez,
But they
must
used
have $1 million chamber.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what they have, but yes, they can also print it in platinum, which is even more expensive. But they use different techniques, and I think what I've understood is that some of them are metal sintering, but some of the others are essentially taking the positive, creating a mold, and then pouring into the mold. So it's not a direct 3D print process. But I think their main business is fine jewelry and things like that. So I can see why they're doing that. The other company that I've worked with, which they have an office in San Francisco, but I found that they'll actually ship things to France, is Sculptio. Are you familiar with them?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want same kind of materials, but want to or have a different preference in Shapeways, I'm also going to make these models available there, specifically for metals, and this version in color. Now, color sandstone, that with the replaceable or removable visor and your face will be about $80 to $90. So it's a little bit more than the $5 key fob, but you might want a cool version of yourself. So I should have my Shapeway version on Wednesday. So I should be able to put some pictures of it. And guess who will be in? Commander Scott, which is my wife.
Nice.
I told you that Sketchfab wrote to me, and actually I think Itzy's did. They said, I noticed that all of your models of your wife, I think you have the most images or 3D models of your spouse on our website. I thought that was kind of funny. They're probably right. Yeah, there are like a dozen models. So if you ever go out to my account there, you'll see all kinds of pictures, and not pictures, 3D models of her. Then some of them you can download. And if you don't know the backstory, in 2015, we kind of went viral because I 3D printed her skull, gave it to her surgeon. They kind of used it to discuss the planning process, and then the rest was history. But I also used 3D scanning and put it up on Sketchfab so that the physician could basically look at the 3D model to see the progress of her recovery. So 2 different molds. Went and did a TEDx in Madrid, Spain. Actually, was it 2015? 3 years ago, almost to July 4th, not too far from now. So that was kind of cool to spend July 4th in another country. Representing, I would say representing the US, but they thought of it like that. Okay, so that's about it, other than how do you make these things that we started off the show with? I will go back to my camera. Where is the camera? Oh, actually, I'm losing my page. Something else that came in a couple days ago. Now, I will have to be fair and honest. I've actually had these for about 2 or 3 weeks now. Valve sent me my developer kit, which was important because they play an essential role in the Lunar excursion VR experience. And we're going to do a little unboxing. I have only opened the lid, so it will be a true unboxing. So if you don't know what these are the Valve Index controllers. At one time was known as the Valve Knuckles. And here you go.
Oh, wow.
So what makes these cool is they work with the HTC Vive or the Index headset, they work with the lighthouses. And so that means this little bar here also contains the what do you want to call it, the infrared receptors, because if you remember, the lighthouses have a laser transmission, and picked up by this, and then by, depending on which ones are hit first, it creates positional awareness. And there's probably also a 3 degrees of freedom IMU in this thing as well to help in that positional information. Okay, but what makes this different, I'll put my hand in it, is that you can secure it, and then look, whee, whee, they stay on your hand. So you still have full hand mobility,
Even if,
and on the top there's a little joystick, which is different from the original HTC Vive hand, and then there's the thumb pad, a little trackpad, and then 2 controls. But what is not seen here is that the grip is capacitant variable, and it can actually determine different levels of positioning of your fingers. So you literally can have, unlike, you know, if you remember your Oculus, you could push buttons and your fingers could move. So now you actually can track finger movement. It's not perfect, but it's far better than anything else. And so that makes it a cool feature. So why did I need these early? So imagine you've got your Lunar gloves on and you want to grasp something. Huh? Isn't that grasping? Now, I did not articulate every finger, so it's basically this kind of movement to grab things, but you literally can grab your controller and grab objects and pick them up and throw them at 1/6 gravity, which is really fun. And you get a left and right one. And the cool thing is, because they're valve on, that means they're Steam VR compatible. So there are models already built for it. So when you bring up the Steam VR virtual room, they show up as these kind of models. They can be used with other devices. I should say other devices, basically Steam VR and lighthouses. But I've heard people use the Windows mixed reality headset with these. But again, you would need the lighthouses, which I guess is a lower cost, because you can get these for, what was it, about $239, $240 for the pair. And then lighthouses are about $150. So if you don't buy their headset and you already have, let's say, a Samsung headset, that's cheaper than buying another headset. So people are doing that, and it seems to work. So I think they're really cool. I don't know if they're still available. I ordered them as soon as they became available, and they work okay. As mentioned, you have this little strap here and a release button, so you can put your hand in it. There is another control on top that allows you to move these. I think you just, I don't want to break it, but I'm trying to remember if you just, no, I can't remember how to change it. Oh, you push it in, and then you can move it, and then you can basically adjust it depending on the size of your hand. So if you've got large hands, you push it all the way out. If you have smaller hands, you push it all the way in, and then you just slip your hand in it, tighten it down, and then it's much more flexible, more intuitive than current controls. So I think this is going to be a huge seller, especially if you've got an HTC Vive or the upcoming Valve, or even the Pimax system, which I don't know how well they're doing, but you could use those with that system as well. So there you go. Now, what else is in the box? I'll just say that you get a USB charger system, but it's USB-C. See the port? So you'll be able to charge them. I highly recommend it. I don't remember how much of a charge, but merely put them on there. It took about, I would say, 3 to 6 hours to charge them. So make sure you put them on as soon as you get it. I don't know how long they'll last, but was running them for at least 3 hours with no problem. And like the controllers, you do get an indication when you're in VR of your battery level. So you aren't caught by surprise. But it is rechargeable, unlike the Oculus. So there you go. So let's kind of move on to one more item, and then we can call it a day, or a weekend, or whatever we want to call it. And because, let's see. Oh. Well, I'm going to have to hurry with this because I forgot to put my laptop on a battery, and I'm almost dead, if not. Okay, well, I'll bring it up real quick, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so as mentioned, I work with Blender a lot now, and 2.8, if you don't have it already, get it. It's still in beta, but it's almost close to release. It is a go-to tool. It's free, but I highly recommend pay a little bit for it. They have some subscription plans. Treat it like another product like Onshape or others. Keep the people developing on it. It is super cool, lots of plugins for it, and many of them from the 2.79 version are being converted. If not already, many of the ones that if you're using Blender are already available. But look who I got in there. I trapped him, Mr.
A cool guy.
Yeah. So what did I do? As mentioned, you saw that I worked with Aldrin to create a suit. I added more components like the boots. They're actually overshoes, the gloves, the life support pack, and did a little bit more texturing to it to make it a little more adjustable. There was not a Buzz Aldrin version, so I have changed all the labels on the suit as well as a life support for Buzz Aldrin. Some texture changes. He used a double mesh for the visor that doesn't work as well on the engine because I created a shell, like the front part of your head, for the light version, and then obviously the full suit had to be rigged, as Chris was talking about, so that you could actually use it working with another, I like to work with Russians, I guess, another Russian who created a motion capture system using Vive trackers and the Unreal system. So this thing is all built in Unreal, and you literally get to wear a suit like this one. You can look at your feet, move them. It's kind of cool. So if you don't feel like you're on the moon, then you get your money back. But since you're not paying for it, that would be kind of hard. So if you're in the Portland area, and I do plan to make the light version available, so if you want to explore yourself, it will be available on the same day. So there you go. So you don't have to come to Portland, but I hope you do. All right, on to your little model. So how do you get this into the USDZ format? Well, that's the problem. Because it's Apple, no one has created a Blender feature for it. So if you go to File Export, you're not going to find an export feature that says USDZ. But you do find a GLTF format. That's the other go-to open source format that's used by Sketchfab and others. I have done that. You are now converted to that, so I will send you your file, and you can upload that immediately to Sketchfab and use their AR component, or you can now use it on your website because Google has created their Web 3D component with AR. So you could literally use this in your Google browser on your Android device to do AR as well. I will have a sample up this weekend of my friend, Captain Kopak, that you can view on the web page. So I'll put a link at the bottom of our show notes here so you can see it, and just using your Google browser. So that should be kind of fun. So it is agnostic as far as that, and you don't have to do any coding in Unity or Android. No, I can't remember. See, I haven't done any Android coding in a while, or iOS, which I am doing, Xcode with the old Objective-C, or their newer, which I've already forgotten the name of, but you can look it up. So I'm working on a new version for ARKit, but I'll have that up later. But until then, if you want to create a USDZ version, Blender's not your answer, but you can create a, my machine just died.
Uh-oh.
That's fine. I don't really need it. I'm going to actually go out to the website now. And come on, you. And my keyboard seems to have died. Great. All right, I'll come back to that. It's probably telling me, Mr. Balzer, it's time. You need to stop your show. People are bored. They want to get on to a new life. Oh, damn it. Yeah, I think the batteries have died on my keyboard.
It all goes at once, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can do some searching, and I'll put some links in here, but essentially what you need to do is create an OBJ file of your static model. Now keep in mind OBJ, but you can also create the other component that I just talked about as well to create animated files, which I will also create. But for now, get started with static models, create your OBJ files, create your texture files, put them all together in one folder. In fact, make sure, and then from there, you have to essentially either go to Victari, which I was hoping to bring up, but I don't have a keyboard anymore. How disappointing. Everything's died on me. Man, well, my mouse is working, and let's see. You know, there's more than one way. Let's see if I can bring it up quickly. I forgot how to do this. And they keep changing the versions. Okay, I want to show the touch keyboard. Let's see if it'll come up. There it is. So let's see if I can get this to work. All right, let's try this. There we go. This might work. See?
Wait, it just might work.
Okay, so let's go back to this. Let's type. Okay, so let's try Victari first.
Oh, I remember this.
Yep. Okay. Oh, I guess I can hit this keyboard. Return. Yay! See? Windows. Cool. All right, I'm not going to log in. Oh, look at that. Somebody else has created a interesting suit. So you can go in, and once you log in, you can upload your model, and there's an export function in USDZ. I found early on, and they may have fixed some things, it was hard back in November to get what you saw in Victari to USDZ. But the cool thing is you can export a USDZ model and also support it on their website. Let's see if I can log in. And we'll bring up the one that I created, if it's still there. Let's go to my dashboard. I'll just prick. All right, so this is the one that I created that you can bring up on the website itself. But as you know, with a lot of cloud-based stuff, you're reliant, and this may actually affect our video signal, you're kind of reliant on their back end. But if you don't have fast machines, it might be better performing. But I've noticed that you do have some lag. So while that's going on, the other option is if you've got a Mac, I'll skip. All right, so here's the model. So I created essentially a scene, and let's see if I can zoom in, with lights, there you go. And you could go out to, I could provide you a link, and you can move around and look at the bust of Nefertiti. You remember that story?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Were they busted in?
So this actually was based on somebody who, on Sketchfab, who took, I think, that model and then retextured it. And so with his permission, I created a version with a display that's very much like the one in Berlin. So that was the goal here. So I created some lights. Then you have the ability, let's see if I can remember how to do this. You can export, and then notice USDZ is one of the formats. And then you just select that, and then you bring it in. Again, when I did this back in November, it had some glitches. But also, if you notice, it also does GLTF, which is the other one we just talked about, which can be done in Blender, which can be used on Sketchfab and others. And then you could port it out directly to Facebook if you wanted. So lots of different options for exporting. So again, no coding, just bring your models in. You can custom create textures and materials as well as lighting for it, and then export it. So it's a good feature. Vectari is kind of a standard mesh instead of a, what do you want to call it, a parametric, or what's the other, solid modeling program. But it is available, and I think they have different plans, but there's a free plan for that. Or if you've got a Mac, and you can download Xcode, and there is a tool in there, but there's also some Python-based tools that you can convert OBJ. They can now do GLTF, and I want to say FBX, but I don't count that one. But you should be able to bring in files and then, using a command line process, identify your materials and then create a USDZ, which is how I created my version of Captain Copat. Is that I brought it as an OBJ, converted it to a USDZ. He now has that file. He can bring it up on his iPhone or his iPad on the screen itself, or press the AR button and project it in the room, have somebody stand next to it and do a Captain Copat selfie. And if he has somebody else hold it, he can stand next to himself and blow up the universe. Just checking if you were listening. Okay, so not a lot of detail there. I'll have some specific areas. People have already put some time in it. I have not tried the Python tools yet because I don't do a lot of Python Mac OS, so I have to go in and change some of the global settings so it knows where to find my tools. Once I do that, because nobody else has identified that specifically, I'll put together a few steps on how to do that. But again, if you don't own a Mac machine, that doesn't do you any good, so Vectari would be the choice. And you can export this model to your phone or iPad from the Vectari site. And there's another tool out there I didn't try yet, but you've got to sign up for it, that can also do it. And I'm hoping somebody actually creates a tool for Blender, but I've noticed a lot of people, drag their feet with these open source tools like Blender when they have to go to proprietary techniques that aren't used extensively. And frankly, I think a lot of people have some issues with Apple with their closed garden, and so you see effort in creating open source tools for their formats a little more sluggish in getting to the market. But there are ways to get around it. I think it's cool because a lot of people have iPads, even if they're not Apple fans, or iPhones, and this is a great way to get a model to somebody so that they could literally put it in the room with them and walk around and take a look at it. And as the AR glasses become more prominent, like magically Microsoft HoloLens and whatever Apple will release in 2020, these will be tools that we need to get used to if you're a designer, because as you know, my goal in on doing all this is create a non-tangible version that's very realistic that people can review before committing any time to 3D printing. Even though it has gotten, the iterative process is much better, it still costs money and time. It's still not something that can be done. This can be done in a matter of minutes and literally without being able to touch it, which I think is important. But in the visual components in the early on, I think that this is a great way to go, both virtual reality and the mixed reality components, to examine models both in medical, architectural, I can't think of the word, design engineering, mechanical engineering, and even planning. And one of the things in your absence, Chris, we've had some interviews with some companies like The Wild who have kind of worked in those areas to integrate. The other component that we don't speak of, here we are interacting, we're both hundreds of miles away. Imagine the same tools of reviewing a model, like we're in the same room. And that is coming from both Google and Apple and others, so that you will have more collaborative process by putting on your glasses, and you'll have an avatar of them and also the model, and you guys can both walk around it, provide feedback, get a virtual keyboard so that you can make notes, and then basically hammer out any design issues before actually going to a tangible model. So that is what I want to see, my vision of where we're going with this, and I think we're almost there. Okay,
Awesome.
So that's it for now. Again, I didn't provide a lot of details. I'll put some notes in there, so if you want to do this, There are some clear steps from others, but as you saw with Captain Kopek and Nefertiti, the results aren't that difficult to do. Hey, if I can do it, anyone can do it, right, Chris?
Yep.
All right, Chris, let's sign off because
All
it is
right.
now
Well, thanks
12:30.
to all our wonderful listeners, and thanks for having me back on the program, Mike. And lots of thanks to the Smithsonian and a lot of these great content contributors, like the guy I'll have
Alvin.
to put his, yeah, exactly. And all these, and also big hats off to the software engineers that are behind programs like Vectory, Blender. Yeah, definitely agree with Mike. Support them when you can. Donate. Most of the stuff's freeware, shareware kind of stuff still, and they could definitely use every dollar they can get. So.
Yep. And the fact is that they're not really pushing for it. Should give you more reason to put more time in it.
And we'll see you next time
on
All Things
3D in Review.
All right.
Next month. Bye.
See ya.